Alright guys, now that we are back, we don't actually need to practice the game to see what needs fixed because the last thing we did was only graphics. We did do nothing with coding and nothing with actually making the game run. So let's go ahead and start out with a few new things. We're going to be talking about timelines first. Then we're going to be coding these problematic buttons right here for pause and for sound, which we will be uploading a sound. You can use any kind of sound file that you have on your computer just as a test, or I can show you how to test it without actually using sound, but rather a different object. So let's go ahead and get into the timelines. First thing you're going to want to do uh, is insert new object, find the timeline controller in the general, and it added timelines. Mm, Okay, so yes, it did this. It did just give me a timeline there automatically. If it did not, make sure you right click and add timeline. Come on. There we go. And I like to stretch mine all the way across. And we're going to add a new timeline. So the one that we're going to be controlling is the saw. We're going to control both of those. And even though it was a click and drag copy instance, so all the coding should remain the same for both, we do need to do these separately. And then basic, a quick view of what you're looking at. We got the red one here, which is your current selection. The green one here is the end of your video, or end of your timeline, which we're going to set to 3 seconds. And now the most important thing is when you're ready to actually edit your animation, make sure you have this little pencil thing checked, or you can press E to do the same. Now what we're about to do can easily be done with the sine wave. I just want to show you a different way to do it. So we're going to go in here, make sure we can see both of our objects. Our edit mode is on, and we're going to move it to 3 seconds at the end of our clip. And we're going to click and highlight those, or you can simply click and control click, and you'll be able to highlight those that way. And we're going to add a keyframe. So what that means is it's going to remember its down placement at 3 seconds, and it's going to remember its down placement at 0 seconds. So halfway in between there, we're going to click and drag these up, and we might let it go off screen just a little bit. And we're going to add another keyframe. If you want to see the animation, just drag it back and forth, or press the play button, and you're good to go. There's just one quick thing we need to do. First things first, we need to name it. We're going to name it Saw. And on the left, if you want it to loop forever, go ahead and do that. Or if you want it to loop so many times, say you want it to do 10 times and stop, you can do that. But we want it to loop forever, so the repeat count does not matter. And let's just give that a quick play. And nothing's happening. And that is because we did not code any events for that. And my clicks are lagging. Give me just a moment. There we go. So now we're going to say for system action on start of layout, we are going to tell the timeline controller, and if you only have one timeline, you can just hit play all. If you have multiple, you can hit play. And we're going to give it the tag saw, just in case that comes in handy for coding later. And now it should play on start of the layout. And we got it going. Continuously looping, so that's good. Alright, so the saws, the timeline, fairly simple. If you want to add many more motions to, say, make this move around the map, and then come back, do its loop, come back over here, do its loop, you could add all those keyframes and just really make it one crazy game. Uh, but we're not going to get into that, and we're going to move on to our pause and sound buttons. So let's start with the pause first, and let me make sure I did upload a second image for the second animation frame. And let's just go ahead and hop right on into here. The first thing we do need to do is add a global variable. And we have done nothing for variables at this point in time, so this is a fresh start on that. The global variable will be time scale, GV, and you can literally name it whatever you want. I suggest you name it in a way to where you know what it's going to do. And I will actually make a second one. You guys do not need to do this. It's going to be strictly for demonstration purposes. So we're going to say timescale on. So we're going to say paused game. Oh, and we do need to make sure to change this from number to Boolean. The difference being this is a number value, pretty simple, and Boolean being true or false. And we want the initial value to be true because the time scale is going to be active, which means it's going to be playing. Now, say you chose to go with the name of the thing as paused game. You would literally need to do the same thing for the type, but the opposite for initial value. Because when it is basically when you have the initial value true, you're saying it is true that the game is paused. But if you have it named as timescale global value or global variable, then you're saying the timescale is true as in it is active. So depending on how you word it could confuse yourself in the coding later. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of the paused game and make sure it says timescale and set to true. So with that being said, we're going to say on start of layout. And you can just add straight onto this. Do not make another system on start of layout. It can get buggy. And we're going to tell the system to set the Boolean to true, just in case something goes a little funky. And then we're going to add a new system event. And we're going to say is Boolean set, which means is the timescale set to true. We are going to tell the system to set the timescale to 1.0. And now we can do control copy, control paste. Make sure we invert this because we are doing a vice versa clause. And basically what we're saying, when the timescale variable is not true, we want the timescale to be 0. And I believe 0 works, but I personally tend to lean towards 0.0 just to make it match that. So we have triggers to pause and play, but we need to tell it when it is being activated. So, whenever our pause button, or actually when our mouse is clicking the object of the pause button, we are going to make the system set the boolean and make timescale as false. Because you're telling it to pause, you want the timescale to stop. And don't forget, we also need to tell the pause button to set the frame to frame 1. That way it shows the play button. Now here's going to be the interesting part of the coding for some people, and is a little bit of a learning process. Order is everything. So if you set the timescale to false, nothing can move, which means this animation frame cannot be set. So you're going to want to set this in front of this. And in some instances, the computer can run fast enough to run all this code at the same time, and it's still going to cause the same issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to say system and wait. And I do 0.2 seconds. And that is between the set animation frame and set the timescale. So there's going to be a very minuscule wait, but it's just going to give the system time to animate that play button into process, and then set the timescale to false. So we're going to control copy, control paste. Oh, and actually before we do that, we are going to add a second condition on top of this left button clicked. Now there are two different ways you could do this. You could say if the pause button is comparing the frame and equal to 0, which is our play button, then it will do this. The smoother way with less glitchy actions I have actually found is to tell the system to compare two values. Oh, no, 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 back. We need variables. Is Boolean set timescale for true? So we're saying if the timescale is true, which means the game is playing and animating, and we hit the pause button, we're going to turn the pause button into the play button and then pause the game. So now we can copy and paste this, and this is basically a vice versa clause, and you only need to invert the timescale. And then over here, we're going to set this to 0. And we can actually remove the 0.2 second wait. Set the timescale to true. And order is key. Now remember, the game is paused, so nothing can move. What we do need is to set the timescale to true and then run the set animation frame. So let us see if we've done that correctly. And there we go. So let me show you the way I have been doing it that looks like it should work, but doesn't. So we're going to hit D to completely disable this, and this one, and this one, and that one. And we can do this one. Just that little tiny piece here, not the whole thing. So now that we've turned all that off, we're basically testing our code, and we see it does nothing. So anything I do coding for that should affect that directly. So this is the way I have been doing it, and this is the way a lot of you might be trying to do it. Let's just say do not try to do it strictly off of commands. You do need to set variables and run it through variables. And this is going to be why. So when the mouse, oh, I gotta make sure I'm on the right thing. When the mouse on object clicked, pause button, And just like the time scale, only this time we're going to add another condition and say when the pause button is comparing frame to 0, showing the pause button, we will then tell the pause button to set frame to 1. So it's going to move it from pause to play. Then just like before, we can set a wait timer for zero point 0.2 seconds and tell the system that we want the time scale to go to 0. So basically, when we're showing the pause and we click the pause, it's going to move the button to play and pause the game. And for all intents and purposes, this should work. But for some reason, when you play with certain things like timescale or animations, you need to set variables to change it in order to not break the game. And we're going to see if we can get a good example here of that. So we're going to set the timescale 1.0, animation frame 0, and this one can be deleted. And this is the vice versa, so we need to make that 1. So whenever the animation frame is 1, showing the play button, and we click it, we're setting the time scale to 1, and then we will move the animation frame to 0, showing the pause button. And for all intents and purposes, it starts to work, but then it doesn't, and it just completely breaks. This is why we use variables. And let me just turn these back on and give us one more quick play to make sure it's working fine again. There we go. Alright, and now with that being said, we are going to do the same thing for sound. So let's go ahead and get into here, make a new global variable, and we're going to say when sound is on. And I jumped the gun again on the enter, so let's change it to Boolean, initial value to be set. So then back down here, and well, first I want to make sure this one's set right. Yes, I do have animation frame 1 for a mute button. And I think we're going to call easy button here. We're going to highlight all of this, all of the code that we did for the pause button, copy and paste. And now just make sure you don't change half of one and half of the other. So we're going to change both of these two right here. And we're going to say this one, instead of pause button, is going to be sound on. And instead of time scale, we're going to say sound on. And double click to get in there. And change this. And then just hit enter to get right back through because we still want it to set to animation frame 1. Still want to wait 2 seconds. And don't forget to change time scale to sound on, and that's going to be false. And then we're going to do the same methods here. Just go back, hit the pause button. Oh, I've done messed something up. So, there we go. I meant to go into here, sound button, and change this to sound on, and make sure it is still inverted. So when the sound is not on, and we click the button, it's going to set the time scale, which needs to say sound on to true, and set the animation frame of the sound on to 0. So sound, everything's been switched the way it should be. And now we have our pause button working. But we haven't actually uploaded any sound and we haven't attached it to anything. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to find sounds on our project file right here. And I think my click is lagging. There we go. And we're going to import sounds. So we're going to say tutorial pick. And I didn't actually have anything ready, so I just picked some music that I had on my hard drive. I'm not trying to open it. Alright, we wait for it to encode and import. So now there's a couple things you need to add to the game. So let's go ahead, insert new object, and we're going to do audio. And if you did want to be particular, yes, we know, you could put this under music rather than sounds. Because say like you wanted a jump sound, a collect sound, and all that, you put that in sounds. And just for easy finding, you could put your music in the music folder. But for our case, it doesn't matter which one's which. So now let's go back in here into our events, find our on system start or system on start of layout. And we're going to do the same thing as time scale. We're going to set a variable. So actually we should go ahead and do that. Add a global variable. And actually, I don't think we have to have a variable, so let's go ahead and try it without the variable this time. So on start of layout, we're going to tell the audio to play. And we do want it to loop. Make sure you set volume to 100, which is the full volume. And give it a tag just in case we need, and we can say music or whatever name that you want to give it. And stereo pan, so basically from 100 left to 100 right, 0 being the middle. So if you wanted to say more sound on the left but still have some sound on the right, you type -50. And then you could change that in the coding if you wanted that to switch back and forth. But for our sake, we're going to leave it at 0. And now we got that playing. And when our sound is on, oh, we've already set for the variable. But yeah, let's see if we can change this. Go back, tell audio to play. Are we allowed to tell it to resume? Not yet. Alright, set volume 100. And sound is on. So we're going to change this one to animation frame and say sound on. Compare frame equal to 0, set it to 1. We don't need to worry about waiting because it's not changing a time scale, so it should affect it no matter what. And then we're going to change this one. Make sure it's set for animation frame number 1. Yeah, because it's changing it to 0. And then we're going to change this one to play, or nope, not play. I would actually prefer to say set paused. And this is where the tag comes in handy. So we typed in music for our tag. If you typed in Shinedown Second Chance official music video, like the full name that it has, that's the tag you would type in. So we're going to set the state to paused. And let's see how it goes. So on start of layout, it should play. And what I've noticed, it usually doesn't when you don't click anything yet. And now that I've clicked on the screen, okay, as you can see, when I clicked on the screen, it activated the sound because it's almost acting like I was not focused on the game. I wasn't playing the game, so the sound was paused. I don't know if the variable is going to fix that, but let's find out. So I'm going to undo all the changes. Do edit action, sound is on. Scale, time scale, make sure I didn't change none of this. We should be good. And we're going to give that a test play to make sure I didn't back up too far somewhere. So we're good. And the sound is playing because we still have it set on start of layout. So that was good. But I did notice that when we clicked this, it did not actually do anything or sound. So is sound on, set frame 1, set sound false, animation frame 1, set true. That should still be 100% right. Oh, let's take this one. We need to change this one all the way back to system. Set boolean sound on to true. So do we have just an is sound on? We do not. So it should not run fully functional just yet. See if it loads in. No sound is loading in because we haven't officially coded that part. So let's tell the system when the boolean is set for sound on, we're going to tell the audio to play. And it's going to be Shinedown, looping, volume. Well, let's put it to 20 so I'm not blaring everybody out. And done. And copy and paste. Invert this one. Change the from play to set paused. And go to music tag because that's what we put our tag. Now, if you did not use a tag, what you could do is say audio and stop. Which then again, actually, it would still need your tag. So it is important to set the tag unless it is your only audio and you could say stop all. Now we should be working 100%. Click on the screen. Alright. And we still had some issue with it still playing whenever we turned the pause or with the sound off. So when the sound is on and we clicked it, we set the animation frame to 1, set sound on to false. On start of layout, set sound to true. Well, since it's initially true, that would almost be a waste of code. It might also be doubling the code, causing a break. So left button clicked, sound is on. We're moving to frame 1 for mute, waiting and setting to false. If it is set to false and we click, then it should turn the sound to true. Set animation frame. Sound is on, set at 20 decibels, and sound is not on, sound paused. So let's just see if I named the tag. Oh, I did not name the tag, that is why. Tag optional music. Sometimes you forget the small steps and it completely breaks it. Okay, so we're clicking game. We can pause it or turn off the sound. Oh, and we had issue with the sound. I don't know if you heard that, so let's go ahead and try that again. Yeah, that definitely doesn't sound right. So, in 0, zero being in the middle, so that's not the issue. Instead of pause, actually instead of start, let's do that. Let's do set paused to music, and we're going to make sure it's on resume. That's actually kind of what I was originally looking for. So we need to find on start of layout, which we're actually about to clean that up here in just a little bit. So we're also going to set the audio. Let's just set, let's see if we can set, no, because we do need to set a tag for it still. So we need to set the play and tag for music. And we can set the volume at 20. Hopefully that's not going to be too bad. Done. Play. So now let's see how it goes. Music sounds good. And the music is off. And please let it be good. There we go. Not only did it come back with good audio, but it has continued where we left off. So it's not stopping and starting again. That is actually what I wanted. And because I did get a little bit scatterbrained there, and someone lost control or lost focus of where we were, let's go over the steps very quickly. Say we're going to set a global boolean. And the way we do that is right click here, add global variable, change it to boolean, and we're going to set it true or false based on our needs. So now that we have the boolean set, we're going to say on start of layout. We're going to play our music and give it the tag of music. And then when we click our music button with the sound variable turned on, it's going to move the animation frame to show the paused button or show the muted button, wait 0.2 seconds, and then set sound to false. And you don't actually have to have the wait 0.2 seconds, I don't believe. Apparently you do. So go ahead and leave that wait time in there. Let everything activate before anything else happens. Uh, so then we're going to also make sure that the left button is clicked when the sound is off. Different action would be to set the sound on to true, set the animation frame to 0. Order is key. Make sure you set it and then change the animation, and vice versa on the other way, because you want it to set the animation, wait, and then do this. And then basically set the code so now the system knows when the sound is on, we're going to resume the music where it was, and when the sound is off, we're going to set it to paused. Now you can set it to stop, and if you know how to stop it from bugging out the audio, awesome. But I would not suggest stopping it and restarting it, because if they just do that every couple seconds, it would kind of get annoying. It would get annoying either way, really. Alright, now we are close to wrapping things up, but just like we did layers, let's go ahead and add some groups so we can find things a lot more easily. So to do that, you can right click, add a group, or simply just have nothing selected and hit G. So we're going to name our group as player overlapping. So now we're going to find all the bits of code that says when our player is overlapping. So we're going to make sure only this is selected. And we're going to do that for everything that says player is overlapping. Including is not overlapping. Now that we have that, we can drag all the way down or all the way up wherever your group might have ended up. And just make sure it drops into player overlapping. Now we can hide that and move it to the top, assuming that's not where it put yours. So now if you want to put another one here at the top without moving it again, you can also just have this top area highlighted, or even just one of these. Make a new group, and we're going to say moving parts. So anything that says moving, we're going to do the same. Control click to highlight. Make sure you select this, and you don't want to select it just like that, otherwise it will stop all selections. And if it's in a big long line, you can shift click and it will click everything between the two clicks. So now that we've got a space, let's just say if this one was one for moving, we would control click so we don't click everything else in between. But let's turn that off and move this to player, or move this to moving parts. So now we need keyboard controls. So let's add another group. Keyboard controls. And find all for keyboard. We're going to do a shift click for all those. And no more keyboard. So because this, by the end, can get quite long, we're going to do another group and say on start of layout. And just like anything, you can also just name it whatever you want. Anything that tells you what you understand what this group is doing. So let's go ahead. We're going to make another group for variables. And this could be, let's actually change this and say global variables, because we will need some instance variables, which is variables based on individual pieces. So that could be another group that you would want to separate. Or you could put it all together, that's up to you. So anything to do with a variable, we're going to highlight and move up to global variables. And as you see, that time it did not place it in there because we did not have it open. So have it open and drag it to, let me undo that. So when you drag it and you're having trouble getting it to go in, just make sure you're hovering over add event to global event or global variables, and it will drop it inside that group. And now we have a nice clean layout. And as said before, we need ordering is key. So we have on start of layout, our global variables. Let's actually put that above on start of layout because that's above all of our code in this one. So we're going to say player overlapping should be next, because when the player is overlapping, that is when our keyboard controls take place, and then our moving parts could actually be below or above player overlapping. That one doesn't really matter because they don't coincide with each other. So now that we've got our group set, let's make one more group, and we're going to call it touch controls. So now we need touch controls, and we're going to be doing it on these 6 buttons. Let me just switch these around a bit. And do not rotate. So we're not going to worry about it being too perfect this time around just to save some time. And we're going to leave it, make sure jumps on the outside, climb ups in between, and climb down is on the inside. That way left, right, it doesn't matter, it should be symmetrical. So we're going to go back to the game, and we're going to insert a new object. And that will be for input for touch. Now that we have that, we can start coding and say on touch, not on tapped object, because tap is different than touch. So it's basically going to wait a brief moment. So when you tap it, you're touching it and letting it go for a brief moment. That is the tap action. We need on pressed. So is touching object. So that's basically is pressed. We're going to say jump, and we're going to set jumps animation frame to 1. And the reason we're doing that is because I have uploaded a second frame for my jump pressed button. Just looks like a dark spot where the finger would be. And let's go ahead and test that to make sure that one works. And you can use the mouse, or if you prefer to make sure the touch controls actually work, you can log in with your phone and test the controls this way. Oh, let's go ahead and mute that. So as you can see, it didn't jump because we didn't code it to jump. And also, my pressed is not unpressing. Well, that is because we did not set a vice versa clause. So copy and paste, invert that, and change the frame to 0. And make sure sound is off. So now when we press and hold, it's going to change the animation frame. So now that we know that that code is working, we can also add in on is touching jump, add the action, and we're going to tell the player to simulate control of jump. Now, just because we've coded this does not mean when you're on the ladder, it's going to jump. Because when you're on the ladder, these controls are turned off. So although it will try to jump, it will not let it jump, which is important unless you want to be able to jump off the ladder. In which case you would have to tell the uh, platform controls to enable, and then tell the platform controls to simulate jump. And you may have to do a brief wait of 0.2 seconds or however long in order for it to activate. So now we don't need to do any second action for this one because the jump is just going to jump and gravity will bring it down. So that should be working 100% right now. So if I jump, he jumps, and it's working. Now let's go ahead and do that for all of the other controls. And as you noticed, actually, when we were clicking this one did not do the pressed, even though it was a click and drag copy. So only when this one's pressed will it highlight. If you wanted it to highlight both, you could, but it'd just be extra coding you wouldn't need to do. So for this, let's just go ahead and code it separately instead of doing the copy and paste. So we're going to say on touch is touching object, choose the climb up. And if you have an animation frame for climbing, this is where you would set it. And then you would also set player control to simulate 8 direction, because this is where you're on the climbing of the ladder. And we're going to tell it to go up. So this time we will go ahead and do a shortcut with copy and paste because we need to set invert is not touching up to really actually just do nothing. So I'm not 100% sure if we need a vice versa clause on that. Let's just double check that. So I'm climbing with my keyboard controls, or yep, I'm pressing and holding and stopping with the mouse. So we're good to go there. Do not need a vice versa clause. So let's do easy button, copy and paste, and change climb up to climb down, and then change 8 direction from up to down. And we also need to make sure on each one of these we need to tell the animation frame to change. So on the climb up, we're adding the set frame to 1, and we are going to add for climb down set frame to 1. And now with our test, we're going to go in here, climb up. We're good, except for the disappearing of the thing. And this is now, because we've set the animation frame, now we need the vice versa clause. So we're going to copy control, or control copy, control paste, and say is not touching, is not touching. And we can take away the simulated control for both and set the animation frame to 0. So basically, when we are no longer touching climb up, our player is not going to be making any action, but our climb up button will change to an unpressed state. Same to be said for climb down. And climb up, climb down. Everything's stopping and starting where it should, and my buttons are working good. And we do not need to code these because since the coding for one will copy over, we are good to go. And as you can see, my jump's not activating because I'm on the ladder. But if I was to move on to the ground, my jump does activate. Well, we are close to the hour, so I think we're going to wrap that up and call that a day. Let me know how you think so far, and I hope everyone's learning a little bit of something by now. With that being said, be smart, be responsible, and good luck.